Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, I mainly talk about manga and anime, whether it's a top video, a short analysis or commentary, or a full breakdown like today's video. Speaking of which, I'm going to talk about Ikalgo from Hunter x Hunter in this one. So let's start this essay. Ikalgo is a chimera ant who was made from a human and an octopus. Both entities are now one, and it is worth noting that he regained memories from both his previous lives. He is an ant which looks like an octopus with a human mind and a human heart. His human side will make him join the hunters and betray the ants. When he met Killua, they were enemies. At the end of their fight, he was at Killua's mercy and decided to sacrifice himself instead of selling out his own. Killua then saved him and told him that they could have been friends. That gesture touched Ikalgo, and he decided in turn to save Killua when he found him seriously injured from his fight with the other ants. The two became friends, and they regrouped with the others. Killua's decision could have been fatal if Ikalgo had wanted to finish him off when he was injured. The dying ants nearby even wanted him to do so. But Killua saw a good guy in Ikalgo even though he was his enemy. So he decided to save him because he knew that this was the right thing to do. Likewise, Ikalgo saved Killua because he couldn't let the person who had saved him die. This was also the right thing to do. Animals can show solidarity with one another or with humans, but honor and principles are human traits. So I think Ikalgo's human side influenced him at that moment. By joining Killua, he entered the world he always wanted to live in. This is a world of real friendship which he won't betray, as we'll see later. A world where helping or risking one's life for a friend is something normal. Such behaviors are what we observed when they first met and saved each other. Neither one of them hesitated to do it. This world of true friendship is what he wanted to reach, but the octopus in him wanted to be a squid in its past life. So the squid world is another world that Ikalgo desired. This also shows that he had already gotten his octopus memory back at that time. He described squids as if they were perfect, and thought that the world of friendship that Killua invited him in was a paradise, but deemed himself unworthy of it before he met him. In his mind, both the worlds that he dreamed about were perfect. So when faced with an ultimatum, since he thought he could never reach the world of true friendship, he was ready to die, hoping he would reincarnate and join his other favorite world to live as a squid. That's the second reason why he wanted to sacrifice himself, besides not wanting to be a sellout. By saving him, Killua showed him that the world of true friendship was real, and that he was worthy of entering it because he's a cool guy who, under different circumstances, could have been his friend. He saw in Ikalgo's eyes that he was not going to sell out his own. I think that this is the proof that Ikalgo deserved to go into his world of true friendship, because this is the attitude that real friends who live in it have towards each other. And this may be a contradiction, because even though Ikalgo said he would not sell out his own, he still ended up betraying the ants by siding with their enemies. However, as Killua explained, friends don't always say thank you when they help or save each other. So there is reciprocity in saving and being saved in return. Ikalgo was ready to die for his comrades, but would they have done the same if the roles were reversed? During the battle, Killua pointed out the difference between good guys and bad guys among his enemies, and Ikalgo belonged to the first category. And once again, Ikalgo was a human before. Like many, he got captured and fed to the Ant Queen, so betrayal is a matter of perspective. In a way, it is a betrayal, but at the same time, it is not. As he'll remind Welfin later, the ants were their enemies. So when Killua decided to leave after getting treated by Ikalgo's doctor, the two became officially friends. Or rather, Ikalgo realized that they were already friends, and with his new resolve, He followed Killua into this ideal yet dangerous world of friendship. And since the squid world and the world of friendship were like paradises to Ikalgo, and that in order to reach paradise, or heaven, one has to die according to common belief, by not dying physically, Ikalgo didn't get to the squid world. Instead, when he was saved and shown the way by Killua, he let go of his assumption that he didn't belong to the world of friendship, so he died figuratively in order for the new him to reach that paradise. We know he wanted to become a squid back when he was an octopus, but I'm curious about the moment he first wanted to live in the world of true friendship. If he got this idea after he became an ant, maybe that's because he didn't have any real friends within his new species and was trying to imagine what it would be like to have some. If this is something that he knew from when he was a human, then this idea was just a souvenir, and since the ants who remember their past lives don't always remember everything at once, he didn't realize that it was a souvenir at that time and thought of it as a dream to fulfill because he had not remembered yet that he used to know this world. During the assault on the king's palace, his role was to find Palm and escape with her. He considered her his friend because she was a friend of his friends. Therefore, he was very eager to accomplish his mission. Using his ability, he manipulated Flutter's corpse, which allowed him to move around freely, as Flutter was one of the ants serving under the king. But his cover didn't work for too long. First, Welfin found it weird that Killua did not attack Flutter when they crossed paths and suspected him of being a traitor. And then Welfin and also Bloster heard Flutter call Leol by his former name, Hedya, and they were intrigued by it. When Ikalgo, still disguised as Flutter, got to the underground area, he found Palm's message and, according to the plan, had to assume that she was dead. He struggled with that idea because he really wanted to save her. The two ants who were suspicious of him followed him to the underground. The first one was Bloster, who attacked Ikalgo when he failed his test about Hagya's new name. Ikalgo didn't know that Leol had changed his name. Fortunately for him, Bloster only destroyed Flutter's corpse. After that, Bloster, who didn't know the elevator's code, couldn't get back up. He destroyed the elevator's doors because he didn't want to be restrained. The sleeping gas, which was the measure to restrain intruders, started to spread all over the place instead of just being contained inside the elevator as a result. Ikalgo used a truck to block the entrance to the elevator to prevent Bloster from eventually escaping through the ceiling. He was able to slip through the small space that was left and waited inside the elevator for Bloster to fall asleep because of the gas. He had managed to beat him, but he couldn't bring himself to kill him. The fact that he couldn't kill him shows again his human side. Chimera ants are naturally hostile creatures. Others in his shoes would have killed someone who was their enemy and who had tried to kill them previously. Later on, Welfin, the second suspicious ant, found Ikalgo in the control room. Ikalgo thought he was probably going to ask him all kinds of questions about his allies. He was basically in a similar situation than when he fought Killua. Once again, he chose not to sell out the people who were on his side, but the difference was that this time, he had real friends to protect, which made him even more determined. He was not going to put them in danger, so, as stated previously, he didn't betray their friendship. He fired at Welfin in the middle of his using his technique, and that surprised him. But Ikalgo still disobeyed his order of not moving, so Welfin was able to fire at him with a little delay. After that, he tried to scare Ikalgo by telling him that if he didn't follow his orders, the centipedes that he planted in his head using his missiles would cause him pain and eventually kill him. Ikalgo refused to comply and kept injuring Welfin with no intention of killing him. He just wanted him not to move and aimed for his limbs. Welfin tried everything he could to get Ikalgo to stop, but none of his threats worked. Despite the pain, Ikalgo remained strong mentally and even looked happy. He wanted to protect his friends so badly by offering his life that it became easy for him to pull the trigger. Although Killua did tell him that there was a difference between risking one's life and throwing it away, his determination was quite admirable. Welfin didn't want to keep getting shot and both of his legs were injured anyway, so he agreed not to move by saying it out loud, at which point the centipede started to hurt. He had greatly underestimated Ikalgo's mental strength, and that could be because of his rank. Indeed, after he got caught off guard at the beginning of their battle, he referred to Ikalgo's status. That's because Welfin used to be one of the Queen's division commanders and Ikalgo was a soldier in Welfin's fellow commander's division Leol. So Welfin was higher ranked than Ikalgo. He was also much bigger and physically stronger than him. Despite all of that, Ikalgo was willing to go through a lot of pain and thus was stronger mentally than Welfin, who gave up after a few injuries. He ended up admitting his defeat and that he had never faced someone who didn't care about their own life. Ikalgo noticed that the more honest Welfin was, the more the centipedes were suffering. Welfin continued to talk and Ikalgo started to remember someone like him, someone with his personality. So he forced Welfin to confess that he had memories from when he was a human. This led to him opening up and talking about Gyro, the person who saved him. That name didn't leave Ikalgo indifferent, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Welfin really wanted to see him, and that's the most honest he could have been. That monologue of truth killed the centipedes. Ikalgo, who still had hopes to find Palm, asked Welfin if he had seen a woman in the palace. Welfin answered that the royal guards did catch someone and put that person into a cocoon. Palm had indeed been captured and turned into an ant. With the help of Killua, she came back to her senses. Ikalgo met her when he went back to the surface. He would also reunite with the others. When the king returned to the palace and everybody felt his powerful aura, Ikalgo wanted to go back to the underground area and hide. Palm, who was carrying Komugi, had the same idea, so they went there together. They thought that Knuckle and Milioron were still alive, and that the king would want a hostage exchange. Ikalgo decided to hide Komugi in Bizef's room. He brought along a still injured Welfin and a still sleeping Bloster. He told Welfin to call the king or his guards to tell them that the girl was in the underground storage area and that they wanted to negotiate. Welfin accepted to do it. Ikalgo then told Welfin to go and see Gyro in the end. He also called him Zekahal, which was Welfin's human name. That surprised Welfin because he had never told anyone. It's because Ikalgo and him were friends when they were human. He couldn't remember his own name, but he reminded Welfin that the ants were the enemies of NGL. They attacked their country and fed them to their queen. Ikalgo revealed to Welfin that Bloster was one of them but couldn't remember his previous life. Welfin asked Ikalgo how he knew that Gyro was still alive. Ikalgo said that since they were still alive themselves, so should he, plus someone like Gyro wouldn't die like that. He made Welfin realize that the ants were their enemies, so he decided to thank him by carrying out his message. During that period, Ikalgo seemed to have recovered a lot of his human memory, but I wonder when it happened exactly. We know that names can bring back memories, so at the end of their fight, after hearing Gyro, Ikalgo's memory probably became clearer, and that's when he started to remember exactly who Welfin was when they were human. Before that, all he said was that he knew someone like him, which isn't very accurate compared to knowing someone and being able to identify them by name. If he knew exactly who Welfin was before hearing him talk about Gyro, Ikalgo would have identified him as Zekahal when he realized that he knew someone like him. On the other hand, since Ikalgo worked under Gyro, he knew who that man was, so the mention of his name could have triggered something in his mind, which would explain how he was then able to remember more of his past, including Welfin's real name and the fact that they were friends. So before he said Gyro, Welfin's personality just reminded Ikalgo of someone he knew, but it was vague because Ikalgo hadn't recovered enough of his memory. He didn't remember that it was Zekahal yet. Things started to make more sense when he heard the name of the leader of NGL, and he deducted, among other things, that Welfin was his friend Zekahal. The name Gyro being the reason behind Ikalgo recovering a lot of his memory is possible because when he was a human, Ikalgo knew that Gyro and Zekahal knew each other. Thus, if either one of them was mentioned, he could potentially remember the other one. The fact that he said that Bloster was one of them also proves that he knew that Gyro and Zekahal knew each other and that they all worked for Gyro. Again, when Welfin pronounced the name of their former leader, Ikalgo was able to remember all of that. It might have been a slow process though. Maybe all those souvenirs didn't come back all at once. This would explain why Ikalgo told Welfin about their past only when he saw him again, and not right after hearing the name Gyro. But one could still think that Ikalgo had gotten a lot or all of his memory back even before hearing that name. This would mean that when he said that he knew someone like Welfin, in his mind he already knew that it was his friend Zekahal, because him and Welfin had a similar personality. In that case, maybe Ikalgo didn't pronounce Welfin's human name at that moment for it to be a big reveal later. This would be an explanation for the audience, but in the story, if Ikalgo had realized that Zekahal and Welfin were one and the same, with only their similar personalities as evidence, I think he would have said something then. So even though their common features helped, it's really the name Gyro that made Ikalgo remember Welfin's human name and the other details of their past life. To add to the previous point of Ikalgo recovering his memory being a slow process, and the reason why he didn't say anything to Welfin right after hearing the name Gyro, there is the fact that finding Palm was his priority. Welfin was still injured and couldn't leave the underground area. Ikalgo saw him again down there, and that's when he revealed to him what he remembered. But before that, he was still planning to leave with Palm after meeting her in the garden of the palace. She wanted to stay for Gon, and he decided to do the same, because this is what friends do in the world of true friendship. So him wanting to leave with Palm means that he had not planned to talk again to Welfin in the palace. This leaves us with two possible scenarios regarding how long it took for him to remember his past and what he was going to do about it. In the first scenario, after hearing the name Gyro, he remembered who Welfin really was as well as the other details, but focused on his mission of escaping with Palm. He didn't say anything then. Maybe he would talk again to Welfin after the battle if he survived, and if they saw each other again, or maybe he didn't think of telling him that he knew him at all. Ikalgo and Palm eventually stayed in the palace, and when trying to hide from the king, Ikalgo ended up going back to the underground area, accompanied by Palm. Since Welfin was there, that last encounter and their discussion were coincidental. Ikalgo would have just taken this as an opportunity to tell him what he had on his mind and what he thought Welfin should do. In a second scenario, after hearing the name Gyro, it rang a bell in Ikalgo's mind, but he didn't remember everything all at once, so he couldn't have told Welfin anything even if there was no mission. The reason for going back to the underground area would still be the same as in the first scenario, but it's between leaving Welfin and seeing him again down there that Ikalgo's memory would have slowly come back. At that point, he was ready to tell Welfin that he knew who he was. That last discussion would again be coincidental. Indeed, in both scenarios, Palm's safety was Ikalgo's priority, and going back to the underground area was not something that he would have planned to do from the start. Earlier in the video, I talked about Ikalgo's world of friendship being either a brand new idea that he developed as an ant or a souvenir in disguise because he had not remembered his former friends yet. If it's the former, maybe his friendship with Zekahal wasn't that strong even though it existed. It's just that they weren't very close or best friends like Gyro and Zekahal seemed to be according to him. In that case, Ikalgo would discover what real friendship was like with Killua and the others. If it's the latter, then him and Zekahal were indeed very close. But everything that happened made them move on with their lives by setting different goals for themselves, and each was going to do what was best for him. Now I tend to think that it's the former because it fits better with the rest of this essay and the fact that the world of true friendship was one of Ikalgo's two paradises. The joy on his face when Killua invited him looked genuine, and he didn't seem to have known this world before. But I thought I would still mention the latter, meaning that Ikalgo had already known what real friendship was like. Because firstly, I'm just speculating here. I'm not saying that any of this is the absolute truth, and secondly, as mentioned previously, the ants don't always remember everything at once. So maybe it is something that Ikalgo has yet to remember. For the time being, let's continue the analysis as if Ikalgo found out the world of true friendship when he met Killua and the others. After giving his instructions to Welfin, Ikalgo remained underground with Palm. She told him that according to Killua, the girl Komugi was important to the king, but the royal guard's opinions about her were divided. Pito wanted to protect Komugi while Poof wanted to kill her. But Ikalgo disagreed and said that the guards would never go against the king's orders. Palm replied by using her and Ikalgo as examples of ants who disagreed with the king, even to the point of siding with the hunters. It's because they are mixed with humans that things like that are possible, and we can even add Miloron to the list. Palm further explained that the guards could still be loyal to the king and act differently. Some would protect the girl because the king cared for her, and some would see her, a human being so close or so important to the king, as a threat. Ikalgo learned from Palm that the king couldn't identify Komugi because she had wrapped her in her hair. If he could identify her, he would have come for her first instead of Knuckle and Milioron. So Palm's plan was to hide Komugi in a place the king couldn't find and stall the negotiations for as long as possible, until the king died. Ikalgo reluctantly agreed with that idea. He seemed remorseful, and Palm understood that. She even admitted that humans were cruel. At the same time, having regrets also made them human. I'll talk about Palm in more details in another video. Maybe when he finally dies, Ikalgo's soul will reincarnate into a squid, and he will have reached his two paradises. At that moment, I think Ikalgo alluded to a more basic and general concept of reincarnation which is present in dharmic religions, rather than the camera ant queen devouring people and giving them a new existence. Ikalgo wanted to let himself get killed by the other ants. Although he is not the one who would have harmed himself, this could be interpreted as a suicide attempt. But how is suicide viewed in dharmic religions? According to the Buddha and the religion based on his teachings, Buddhism, committing suicide is an unskillful action which does not solve one's problem. It is not the end of suffering and can even make things worse. So based on those lessons, I'm not sure that Ikalgo would have reached a paradise world after letting himself get killed by the camera ants in the water. And there is no guarantee that his wish of becoming a squid would have been granted either. But even if it had, since suffering does not end with suicide, still according to Buddhism, maybe he would have found out that squids were not the perfect creatures he thought they were and thus would have continued to suffer. If anything, Ikalgo's real and only paradise is the other one, the one where he lives like a human with his new friends. He used to be a human anyway. Wanting to become a squid was based on a desire with unverified results. He basically craved to be a squid without really knowing what it would be like, and he rejected himself by calling octopuses ugly. But if craving or desiring something is a cause of suffering, Ikalgo was suffering just by nourishing the desire of being something that he was not, a squid. I'll add that he was also suffering for hating what he was, an octopus. Unlike the uncertainty of the squid world, which Ikalgo only knew through his own fantasies, the world of friendship has witnesses who told him exactly what that world was like, and even though it contained pain, Ikalgo would get what he had always wanted: real friends. Also, according to the Buddha and followers of Buddhism, achieving nirvana means liberating oneself and not being under the control of one's desires anymore. The thing is, when Ikalgo entered the world of friendship, he was well aware of what he was getting himself into, and he liberated himself from his former life where he wasn't happy. Later, when facing Welfin, he was glad and ready to die to protect his friends. He was at peace and in harmony with his aversion, here the pain in his head caused by the centipedes. And Killua did warn him about the pain inside the world of friendship. Also, he was at peace and in harmony with his desire to live with his new friends because he was not controlled by it. Indeed, he wanted to be with his friends, but if by dying and not being with them anymore, he was in exchange able to protect them, he was ready to do it. He was at peace with that outcome. And it is worth noting that Hinduism even considers a form of suicide as honorable. There is apparently a difference between a suicide which is caused by despair or anger and one which is committed by a person who has achieved a high spiritual state. Against Welfin, Ikalgo was not angry nor desperate. He made his decision very spontaneously, like it was obvious or normal to give his life for his friends. He didn't struggle between selling them out and dying. The first option was out of the question, so there was no dilemma. He let go of his eagerness to live with his friends, and again he was peaceful doing it. The first time that he was ready to give his life, he was hoping to get something for himself in return, becoming a squid. So he had another motive or desire and was very attached to it. The second time, though, was a selfless and honorable act with the only satisfaction that his friends would be safe. So out of his two paradises, the squid world was craved for but unknown, and the way to get to it, meaning suicide, would not guarantee going to it. He would also have to willingly change his appearance in order to be accepted. On the other hand, in the world of friendship, he would be accepted despite the appearance that was imposed on him, because he would be welcomed by real friends. Even though this world was not perfect because it was filled with pain, in Ikalgo's eyes, it was a perfect and peaceful world that he wanted to join, but without being attached to it. This was a place where he could effortlessly choose to protect his friends no matter the cost. And he knew that they would protect him too. Somehow, in the end, while still living in the physical world, Ikalgo found his little piece of paradise, his little nirvana. Now, I don't know if Yoshiro Togashi, the author of Hunter x Hunter, thought about all of that when he created Ikalgo. I'm just sharing my analysis of the character. If you like this type of content, consider sharing this video and/or subscribing to my channel. Also, let me know what you guys think in the comments section. More analyses and theories are coming.